Hello, welcome to Fairford in Gloucestershire. You join us at the world's biggest military air show, the Royal International Air Tattoo. The weather's just about perfect, and this weekend some 200,000 people will gather here for the premier event in the aviation calendar.
Yes, as ever, there'll be aircraft here from all over the world. In fact, 23 air arms from 19 countries are represented, and some of those air display teams will be making their first ever appearance here at Fairford. And this is the plane everyone's come to see. We'll be looking at America's stealth bomber, which has never before landed at a British air show. From the Ukraine, there's a new display from the Falcons in their MiG-29s. And we'll be flying with the graceful Silver Swallows from Ireland.
We'll also be meeting the British pilot who takes off from a Jeep, and the American hero who says we'll soon be flying to the moon. But we start with one of the world's most popular and colourful air display teams, the Frecce Tricolori from Italy. Our air show commentator is Sean Maffett.
With 10 aircraft, the wonderful Frecce Tricolori, the three coloured arrows, are the biggest aerobatic team in the world. And that makes it even more remarkable that they managed to fly the aircraft in the right order, so that the front five here all have the right numbers on their tail fins, with the odd numbers on the leader's right and the even numbers on his left. So they take off in two sections of 5, and after they've got themselves safely off the runway, and even at Fairford that's not big enough for all 10 of them to take off in one group, and they then merge the two groups together for the early part of the display so that all 10 of them are flying together. And because they do have more aircraft than anyone else, they can fly this formation, the 10 aircraft triangle. There are arguments about the ideal shape for a team aerobatic aircraft. Some people say it should be swept wing, some of them think it should have straight wings, but the Frecce sort of managed to have it both ways, with straight wings and those arrow markings. For this manoeuvre, their downwards bomb burst, the main formation is down to 9 aircraft. And that's so that the number 10, Captain Stefano Giovanelli, can fly up through the middle. And once he's out on his own, he does something that jet aircraft aren't really supposed to be able to do. This is more often the sort of manoeuvre that only special aerobatic piston-engined aircraft do, not trainer jets like the MB339. But Captain Giovanelli uses his display smoke to demonstrate just how the so-called Lomshevak can be done by a jet. Quite incredible. Now, most teams do crossovers with single aircraft or in pairs, but not the Frecce Tricolori. They do it in fours. And then it's back to number 10, demonstrating the low-speed manoeuvrability of the MB339 with some crazy flying. And Italian patriotic fervour rises to a peak as the Frecce fly what they call the biggest Italian flag in the world.
The Frecce Tricolori. Well, besides bringing pleasure to thousands of aircraft enthusiasts, the show has over the years raised millions of pounds for the RAF Benevolent Fund. It's staffed entirely by volunteers who've come to regard this huge event as a labour of love and also as a social occasion. And that also goes for the air crews, who this year have brought more than 400 aircraft here to Fairford.
From when we started the Air Tattoo, we very much worked it to be a gathering of aviators. They fly military aeroplanes, but deep down they're aviators. And we've had many nations coming together over the years, and If you saw them last night in the bar together, from all parts of the world, drinking, telling stories, dancing. It's a gathering of like-minded people in a friendly environment.
This year there are special celebrations to mark the 50th anniversary of the United States Air Force. More of that later. Let's look now at the show's other main theme, fighter aircraft. Top Gun pilots from around the world are here to show off their skills, and some of the planes date back to the First World War.
Aerial combat started in the First World War. One of the most famous fighters, here in the lead, was the extraordinary three-winged Fokker triplane, made famous by the Red Baron Manfred von Richthofen. This triplane replica represents the aeroplane of one of von Richthofen's colleagues, Lieutenant Josef Jacobs, and he was actually the highest scoring pilot on Imperial German Air Force triplanes. And the two British aeroplanes are replica SE-5As, and that SE stood for Scout Experimental. But these aircraft became anything but experimental and actually turned into some of the most successful fighters of the First World War. The Second World War saw the change from biplanes to monoplanes, and at least at the start of the war, the two most famous ones were the Hurricane and Spitfire. Both aeroplanes achieved their finest hour in the Battle of Britain in 1940. Monoplane fighters brought a vast increase in firepower over the biplanes, which usually carried 2 guns at the most. Even early versions of these fighters carried 8 machine guns in the wings.
Spitfire on the brake to low approach, go around.
And there was an even bigger quantum jump when the jet came along. For practical purposes, that was after the war. And jet experience in the Korean War was what sparked the ideas for this, one of the most famous fighters of the 50s and 60s. And despite its age, the F-104 is still in service around the world. The Italians still have 5 squadrons of them. It has an amazing performance for an aircraft with 40 years service behind it. Its top speed is 1,450 miles an hour, more than twice the speed of sound. Another very famous fighter from the late 50s, still in service, here with the German Air Force, but also with the Israelis, amongst others. In fact, this particular aircraft, German squadron, is Jagdgeschwader 71 Richthofen, which is named after the Red Baron, and the squadron call sign is Baron. The Phantom also saw service in both the Royal Navy and the RAF, and in fact it was the last big jet to fly off the Royal Navy's aircraft carriers before the Navy was temporarily reduced to flying only helicopters off their ships. That was before the Harrier came along. And we've moved along to the mid-60s with the Mirage F1, which by a strange piece of French logic was designed to replace the Mirage 3. It has the same top speed at altitude as the F-104, 1,450 miles an hour, but it's much more maneuverable and it has better range and endurance, as well as being able to carry more weaponry. Dassault sold the F1 to about 11 other countries, and many F1s are still operational, as is this one with the Spanish Air Force's 142nd Air Defense Squadron. The Viggen brings us more up to date, and this air defense fighter version is actually the last of 5 different versions, making the Viggen family truly multi-role. Fighter Viggen became operational with the Swedish Air Force in 1979. It's got a sophisticated radar, and it's designed to be effective even at very low altitudes. And it also carries a fearsome array of weapons, from medium-range Skyflash to short-range Sidewinder missiles, as well as an automatic cannon which fires 22 explosive shells per second. The Su-30 is one of the many developments of the famous Su-27 fighter. And that was the first Russian fighter to have so-called fly-by-wire computer controls instead of a manual flying control system. This model is an extended range version, and unlike the single-seat Su-27, it's got a crew of 2. And it's got such a sophisticated radar system that the backseat crewman can actually use it as a sort of mini AWACS, an airborne warning and control system, for controlling other fighters on interceptions and other tasks. as these days no fighter pilot operates entirely on his own.
Many of the world's top pilots are gathered here at the show, but in reality, of course, they never have a chance, hopefully, to battle it out amongst themselves up in the skies. But there is a chance to do that here on a simulator. So let's find out how they can become the world's top gun.
Okay, looking straight ahead, gentlemen. And go.
It looks like a game, but for these airmen, it's deadly serious. 128 contestants are battling it out to become the world's top gun. Of course, pilots often use computers in training, but this is different. The terminals are linked to simulate one-to-one combat, and since this is literally a knockout competition, it's a case of get your opponent in your sights and shoot him down. The screens, by the way, are just for spectators. It's even more real in a virtual reality headset. Some of the dogfights last just a few seconds, as will probably be the case in real life. The contest is open to all aircrew, so for the real fighter jocks here, there's always the danger of being shot down by a transport pilot, or worse still, a navigator. We're joined now by Al, who's a Tornado navigator, and by Dave, who's an F-16 pilot. Tell us about what it was like when you were battling it out above the skies.
It's very unusual. It's not like the real aircraft. It's very disorientating. When you try to move your head away to look over your shoulder, it's not like the real world, because obviously you have more peripheral vision, you can see more. So it's quite disorientating.
It's interesting. In fact, in the first engagement, looking over my shoulder, looking over the top, looking at Al, I wound up impacting the ground just because it is that disorienting.
So who won, guys?
I'm afraid Al won.
I did.
It's a bit embarrassing, isn't it?
Well, we're going to take the next level up into the sky in the real airplane. So.
All right, well, we are going to have a dogfight winner. We'll let you know who that is at the end of the programme.
Well, I'm now with what's absolutely the smallest aircraft here at the show, the tiny French-built Cricri, and with me is its pilot, Tim Senior. And Tim, I gather that as well as flying the smallest plane here, you're also taking off from the shortest runway, aren't you?
That's right, it's about 4 feet long. In fact, it's the roof of the vehicle behind me.
So it's actually moving when you take off?
It is indeed. We're doing 70 miles an hour down the runway of Fairford.
What's it like to fly? Because it's absolutely tiny.
It's very small, but it's very, very manoeuvrable. It will actually do a roll in about just over 1 second.
So you can do the whole gamut of aerobatics in this?
You can indeed. It's fully aerobatic. It's a bit like flying an armchair, really. The fact that it's really a chair with a pair of wings on. There's not a lot else. I think someone yesterday said you don't get into it, you strap it on, which is probably a very good description of it.
So just take me through the sequence of events when you're taxiing along the runway on the top of the moving Shogun.
Okay, I call out Shogun roll, to which the driver then accelerates hard down the runway, and I call out the speeds that I have indicated, as in 50, 60, until I get to 70, at which he then holds that speed. And when I reach the right position, I then call out ready, 3, 2, 1, and on the command now, he pulls the release. With a gentle squeeze back on the stick, the aircraft takes off.
The Cricri's engines are only about as powerful as a garden lawnmower, and the tiny plane is positively dwarfed by this Antonov, which shares its hangar. They live just down the road at Rencombe Airfield, along with some other friends. Here come the wing walkers of the Crunchy Flying Circus.
The Crunchy Flying Circus. Now, one of the biggest attractions here at the air show, at least the one that's attracting most of the crowds, is the F-117 stealth fighter. And I'm joined now by pilot Dave Shipley. Dave, tell me a bit about the aircraft.
Well, it was originally designed and built in the late 70s, early 80s by the Lockheed Company in the States. And I think, as most people know, it was kept in the black world, or secret, for a lot of years at Tonopah Test Range in Nevada. In the early 90s, late 80s, it came out in the open, and it's been out doing its thing ever since.
Now, I know that obviously it can't be seen on radar, so how does it get safely around the world and get to displays like Fairford?
Anytime we're flying in a peacetime environment, which obviously is the majority of the time, if you'll look at the side of the airplane, right by the U.S. star, you'll see an appendage attached to the airplane, and that's called an RCS enhancer, or radar cross-section enhancer, and that allows air traffic control radars to pick us up.
I see. Okay, well, Dave, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Well, this is one on display, but there's another just about to take off for its display, so let's have a look at that.
It just doesn't look like an aeroplane, does it? In fact, as it goes away from us, you can see why they talk about its platypus tail. And part of its stealthiness is due to not having any surface or line nearer to the vertical than 30 degrees. And the other thing is, where are the jet pipes? Well, that's another stealthy bit. The jet exhausts come out of that narrow slit with baffles in it, so they don't give off much infrared heat emission, and also so that radar waves don't go into the tailpipe and illuminate the metal engine parts. And being stealthy also means no reheat, no afterburner, because that's a dead giveaway. But it's not particularly fast, definitely not supersonic. In fact, it cruises at about 530 miles an hour, which is slower than a 747 Jumbo. And that's partly because its main stealthy characteristic is its faceted construction. No curved surfaces, all flat plates with straight edges, sometimes in zigzags. And that doesn't make for great aerodynamics, i.e. it doesn't fly all that well, at least in comparison with more conventional aircraft. But the point is, good flyer or not, it does its job triumphantly well, as the Iraqis found out on that first dramatic fight-back night of the Gulf War. But if we were lucky enough to see the stealth fighter, which really isn't a fighter at all, but a bomber, there was even more of a buzz as we waited for this, which is actually called the stealth bomber, or more properly, the B-2A Spirit. This really is the most extraordinary aircraft. It does away with the F-117's facets, and it's all composed of complex curves, except for that distinctive trailing edge VWV shape. And no vertical surfaces at all. It's the genuine, unabridged flying wing. The aircraft with it are its F-15 escort fighters, without which it's not allowed to move, in this part of the world at any rate. But the real treat for the Royal IAT audience is that the Spirit is landing. It's never before been allowed to land in Britain, and that it does so on this occasion was a tribute to some quite amazing smooth talking and arm twisting by the directors of the Royal International Air Tattoo. Back to those curved surfaces. They're as effective in stealth terms as the older F-117's facets. And the great thing about this shape is it's a good flyer. It's more efficient, aerodynamically speaking, than many earlier aircraft, even the sleek B-1B bomber. It had flown direct from its home airfield at Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, taking on fuel from tankers over the Atlantic. And while it was on the ground, it kept at least one of its 4 engines running all the time.
The jet performed remarkably. Over 10 hours of flight, we didn't have one write-up, one maintenance problem at all. So that's fantastic. It's very, very automated. It only takes 2 guys to fly it, as you know. And one guy can fly if the other guy wants to take a little cat nap. We have a lot of human factors development going into flying those long durations. And we'll have guys going to simulators, and based on the results we get from the simulator, we can take all those different factors, and then we train the air crews that are flying this 30 or 40-hour missions, so they know when to take a nap and how to stay fresh. And specifically, when you get ready to air refuel at night, or you get ready to drop bombs, you want to be at your peak. So they teach us how to get to that peak, so we can accomplish the job we set out to do.
So, after an hour or so on the ground, Spirit is off again on another 10-hour flight back to Whiteman, with time first for another accompanied fly-past. As it comes towards us, you can see it's even quite stealthy to the naked eye, in fact difficult to see. And interestingly, although its wingspan at 172 feet is nearly as big as the mighty B-52, in length it's only a little bit bigger than the F-15 fighter.
regular visitors here at the Royal International Air Tattoo are a group of airmen and women from all over the world whose squadrons share the tiger motif as part of their insignia. In fact, these planes here today have been specially painted up for the event, which is known as a Tiger Gathering. And it's all become, well, a bit of a social occasion.
The Tiger squadrons are any squadron that has the tiger as an emblem. There's approximately 24 NATO squadrons now with a tiger or similar as their emblem, and every year they get together.
We do it a couple of times a year, so this one is a real big one.
We belong to the Tiger Association with the My Squadron, which is the 11F squadron from the French Navy, just because we carry on a French carrier, Clemenceau, and the Clemenceau emblem is a tiger.
Of course, you've got all the the insignia here. How many tigers do you think you've got between you?
We're all tigers.
Hurrah.
Hurrah. Indeed.
So what's the motto then?
Tiger, tiger, tiger!
Thank you very much. Well, from a group of regulars to a team that are making their first ever appearance here at the Royal International Air Tattoo, the Ukrainian Falcons.
Now earlier, I was talking about how most aerobatic teams fly trainer aircraft. Well, here's the exception that proves the rule. The Ukrainian Falcons fly the very much front-line MiG-29. And this is a new team, not just at Fairford. It was only formed in the autumn of '96, and it did its first display in May '97 near Kiev, which of course is the capital of Ukraine. And what a grand sight to see 6 of these 15-ton monsters flying in neat triangle formation. Well, I call them monsters, but that's just the size. Recently, at any rate, the Russians do seem to have had an amazing facility for producing good-looking aeroplanes with clean, graceful lines. And here's the Russian aircraft trademark, the tail slide. It's difficult to see against the featureless blue sky, but the aircraft is actually going backwards before tumbling over and pointing down. Pilots are all test pilots, mostly from the State Scientific and Testing Aviation Centre. They number 4 full colonels, 1 lieutenant colonel and 1 major. A senior bunch. And here's confirmation, if we needed it, that the Cold War is dead and buried. 5 Russian-built Ukrainian MiG-29s fly an arrow formation over a waiting American B-1B intercontinental bomber.
One of the other teams displaying here for the first time is the Irish Air Corps, and I'm joined now by Captain Graham Martin. Now, tell me first of all a little bit about the Irish Air Force. We don't hear of them often. Do you do many displays?
We get to do quite a few displays. Yeah, we're right. It's quite a small air arm. It's only about 1,000 personnel all told. And Light Strike Squadron, which supplies the aerobatic team, only have 6 aircraft. So this year is our 75th anniversary. So because of that, we're getting to do an awful lot of shows. So around the UK and around Ireland and in Europe. So it's great to be here in Fairford.
The Silver Swallows look great in the skies, but they're not the youngest of aircraft, are they?
No, we got them in 1975, second-hand from the Austrians and the Germans. And they would have been about 10 years old at that stage, I would imagine. So about 1965, so I would imagine it's their date of birth.
But nice aircraft to fly.
It's a beautiful airplane to fly, yeah. It's very sleek, quite nice. It fits like a glove. It's got obviously two engines. There's 400 knots is our max speed. So it's got all you want except powers of reserve for formation aerobatics. But it's a nice airplane to fly.
Well, Captain Martin took us up in the skies a short time ago to give us his view of what it's like up there.
There's a stopwatch being hit now for our timing. So we get an accurate time, and bang, overhead. climbing along. Approximately 15 seconds we go away from the crowd, depending on the wind, before we pull up into about a 4G, pulling straight up into a starboard wing over. So round about now, there's the pull up, there's a G piling on. Look over my right shoulder there to pick up the axis. I'm rolling starboard all the way around. We get the top here, we're doing about 140 knots. We climb to about 2,700 feet. Look back, got to find the reference, and then depending where the reference is, we've got to pull the maneuver tighter. Today we have to pull it a bit tighter, about 3.5 G. And we're descending now, looking for our first maneuver. So we go from here to wings level, and I pick up the reference, looking for 300 knots for the first loop, onto reference, a few seconds, and there we go. Pulling straight back on the stick, looking to get 4G on the clock, constant G all the way around. We have a slight on-crowd wind today, so we have a slight wing low away from the crowd in order to maintain our displacement. Over the top, looking back, finding the horizon again, looking forward, straight down again now. Again, we're looking for 280 knots this time, 500 feet. Same amount of G piling on all the way back to 4G, and we're on max G round about now. You can see the crowd just there behind me. Got to look back, find the horizon again. Once I have the horizon, I have my reference points. Ease off. About 3,000 feet we gain here. Speed back to 140 knots. And we come over the top, descending. Bottom out again at 500 feet. So coming back down. This is a spectacular maneuver here. You might see the wingman, again, Paul Whelan. It's called a rollback. And he'll go to max G, up to 6G, stress the airplane and roll away, and they come back into a new formation called arrow. So a couple of seconds now, you'll see him pull up. There he goes, and they're up. They roll around and they fall back onto the number 4, and they're just gone out of view now because they're actually formating on the guy behind me. I'm running on line here now. In a moment I'm going to go inverted. There you go, up, check, roll. And you can see there, just over the top of the canopy, Lieutenant Christian Keegan, the number 4, and he's coming right in. He's getting so close that you just can't see him now because he's right behind my head. And it's a mirror pass, so I'm pushing there all the time. You see the straps hanging upside down. 20 seconds is our max. You can see him moving back slightly there, just over behind my head. And push, minus 3.5 G, all the way around.
Graham Martin there, flying the Fouga Magister. Over the course of the Royal International Air Tattoo, Fairford becomes the country's second busiest airfield after Heathrow. Over the weekend, these air traffic controllers behind me have to coordinate hundreds of aircraft movements. But of course, they have to get the planes here in the first place. Since there's no radar here at Fairford, they work very closely with colleagues down the road at Bryce Norton, where controllers guide the aircraft in. Our cameras have been down there, and now we're going to take a look at how that's done. Bryce Norton is the RAF's main transport base and is also a centre for pilot training, so there's plenty of work for its air traffic controllers.
Sierra 371, turn right to head 130.
In their darkened room below the tower, these radar controllers can see aircraft up to 50 miles away. Normally, their job is to guide planes to and from Bryce and to provide separation from other traffic passing through the area. But today, a whole section of the radar room is handling movements into Fairford. One problem is that many foreign pilots are not familiar with local procedures. Some of them speak little English.
Hungarian 335, negative, turn left, heading 100.
The language is obviously a problem, although the universal language of air traffic is English. However, the instrumentation of various aircraft from different countries is different. The instructions have to be given differently, and their interpretations of the words we say could be different as well. So yes, it does give us a problem. We have to speak very clearly and slowly.
200 miles away at Leaming in Yorkshire, our own flight is setting off for Fairford. Cameraman Steve Dan is flying in an RAF Hawk from 100 Squadron. His task is to film aircraft arriving for the show. The Hawk is an ideal plane for this. The cockpit gives good visibility and it's fast enough to keep up with the large jets.
It's like a sports car of the fast jet world, if you like. It doesn't have the same weapon capabilities of the frontline fighters and bombers, but we can simulate a lot of aircraft with this aeroplane, and it acts like a fast jet, basically.
120, level, gear flaps travelling.
Our Hawk takes off and heads for Fairford. On the radar screens, controllers give it a number, 4666. Our call sign is Romeo 94.
Romeo 94, Fairford director. Turn right, heading 360.
The Hawk is guided towards a Hungarian MiG-29 on its way to the Royal International Air Tattoo. Controllers ask the pilot if he's happy for our plane to come alongside.
Hungarian 335, and a Hawk aircraft to the south of you by 5 miles, maintaining flight level 70. Wishes to take some photographs. Are you happy for him to join at your level? He's squawking.
Roger. I affirm. And Hawk is inside. Right now behind us.
Moments later, the radar blips merge as the two aircraft form eight. As Andy Hurd looks after the flying, Steve gets his pictures. Soon it's time for the MiG to begin its descent into Fairford.
Right, 270.
Okay, I've got to go underneath him, he's going right.
Back at base, the Hawk will now refuel for its next sortie. For Andy Hurd, it's all in a day's work. For visiting pilots, the radar chase comes as no surprise.
I think most of them expect it. They're coming to the International Air Tattoo, or the Royal International Air Tattoo, and therefore they are going to expect to be filmed by a number of cameras, let alone one in the air.
Well, now we come to one of the central themes of the show. This year sees the 50th anniversary of the United States Air Force, and hundreds of Americans have flown in for the event. Some of their planes are Air Tattoo veterans.
484 was at Air Tattoo in 1983 at Greenham Common, and it's back this year. It suffered some battle damage in Desert Storm, but we're fortunate to have it back.
Yes, I understand we're pretty lucky to have the aircraft here today. What happened?
It was actually a mid-air collision during a night refueling with an F-111. He came off the boom and got a little disoriented, came under the aircraft, got sucked up and hit the number 2 engine. And from there he came over and his right wing went into the fuselage of the aircraft just behind the cockpit, causing a rapid decompression. And he came out of that and managed to come up under and hit the nose wheel area, and still recovered both aircraft.
The US Air Force's first combat came in Korea, and at the time they still had plenty of Second World War piston-engined aircraft. But the Russians had the new MiG, and good though the P-51 Mustang was, it was no match for the new jet. To counter the MiG-15, the Americans introduced the Sabre, and then in 1949 this, the F-100 Super Sabre. It was supersonic in level flight, and its top speed was Mach 1.3. And the pilot of this aircraft, Harv Damschen, used to fly it in the 1960s. He's now 61 years old, still going strong. This actual aircraft is still operational in Germany, towing airborne targets for the German Air Force. And just listen to the Pratt & Whitney J57 afterburner cutting in. A welcome return to Fairford for the A-10 Tank Buster. These aircraft used to be great favourites at IAT a few years back, but we've not seen them for a while. And this immaculate Finger 4 formation comes from the 81st Fighter Squadron at Spangdahlem in Germany. The prototype B-52 H-jet bomber first flew when the USAF was only 5 years old in 1952. This aircraft is the last model, the B-52H, and it's operated by the Air Force Reserve, the 93rd Bomb Squadron at Barksdale Air Force Base. B-52s actually operated from Fairford during the Gulf War. They would fly 17-hour sorties to drop 17 tons of bombs per aircraft on Iraq. Somewhat more up-to-date with the low-flying intercontinental B-1B bomber, and there are actually 2 of them in the flying display. This first one, taking off with its swing wings in the fully forward position, is from the 37th Bomb Squadron at Ellsworth Air Force Base, Rapid City, South Dakota. And the second B-1, flying by fast, with the wings fully swept back, is an unusual bird. It's operated by the Kansas Air National Guard. In fact, that's the Kansas flash on the tail fin. That's from the 127th Bomb Squadron at McConnell Air Force Base, Wichita. And this helicopter announces the climax of Britain's tribute to the first 50 years of the United States Air Force. It's followed by 4 F-15 Strike Eagles in the so-called missing man formation. The aircraft on the leader's right pulls out of the formation. The gap that's left symbolizes the pilot who doesn't return from the mission. And the whole flypast commemorates the 3,100 people who've died in combat for the United States Air Force.
Safety has to be the top priority at any air show. There have been a number of accidents over the past few years at shows across the world, although Fairford does have an exceptionally good record. Let's go in now for the pilot's safety briefing.
Welcome again, ladies and gentlemen, to Royal International Air 297. We'll go through this morning's flight display briefing, similar to yesterday's profile. Can I first of all say from yesterday's that today I think we'll plan to work from the British minute, which lasts 60 seconds, rather than some of the minutes that seem to last for about 75.
Well, you might think the most important aspect of airshow safety is the flying itself, and indeed all the pilots have to demonstrate their skills to the show committee before they display to the public. But that's not all. Yesterday's show ended up running late because some teams flew for too long. Today they're being told it mustn't happen again.
Ask Ian to run through today's Met.
Well, I'm joined now by Group Captain Jeff Brindle, who was conducting the safety briefing. One thing that came across to me listening in there was that time is of the essence.
Well, it is for two reasons. One is obviously we're running to a programme and we'd like to make sure that everybody's seen at the right time doing the right thing. But there is a safety aspect to timing too. If people start running late, aeroplanes that are touring around from one show to another or are coming in from external areas have to spin out their fuel, and therefore any time running late, any delays, cuts into their fuel reserves. So there's a safety aspect as well as a presentational aspect to timing.
Now, obviously, when you're flying over crowds, you need to bear height in mind as well. What are some of the particular problems posed there?
Well, the first thing I've got to say is correct you slightly. We don't fly over the crowd, that's the whole point. The nearest they should come to the crowd is about 230 metres for the slower aeroplanes and 400 metres for the faster ones. So the heights and speeds are all carefully enshrined in the regulations to minimise risk to the public should there be a problem.
Well, since we filmed the show, the potential danger of air displays has tragically come under the spotlight. These aircraft are flown by the Royal Jordanian Falcons, who are Fairford regulars. Their performance here was faultless, which is what we've come to expect from one of the world's top aerobatic teams. A week later, their solo pilot plunged into the crowd at Ostend in Belgium. 7 spectators were killed and more than 50 injured. The crash is still being investigated, but it's perhaps worth mentioning that despite several display accidents, it's almost 50 years since any member of the public was killed in this country, which is a great credit to those who organise our air shows.
Here's the only other formation display team at the show that isn't fast jets. Instead, the distinctive sound of 5 helicopters. But otherwise, like the other teams, upwards brake, display smoke, all the display trappings. These are Britain's flying soldiers, the Army Air Corps. With more than 300 helicopters on the books, the Corps is actually the biggest operator of helicopters in the country. But although the aircraft and the crews are provided by the Army, the crews train and rehearse and do their displays in their own free time. Back with the jets, this is the United States military's new long-range heavy-lift transporter. The idea was to have something with the capacity of the huge C-5 Galaxy and the airfield performance of the Go-Anywhere Hercules. This is the short takeoff, and we'll see the landing later. But part of the efficiency of this aircraft comes from those enormous lift-enhancing flaps at the back of the wing, giving the wing a lot more curvature and thus more lift. In fact, in regular operational use, the C-17 takes off and lands in less than 3,000 feet, and that's less than a third of Fairford's runway. And that means that it can use more than 6,000 airfields around the world that normal wide-body jet airliners can't use. But what about the carrying capacity? Well, it didn't succeed in carrying as much as the C-5, 76 tons as opposed to more than 120. But it does have the bulk capacity to carry all of the types of standard wheeled vehicles that the US Army possesses. It can also carry 3 Apache attack helicopters, and it's the only aircraft that can airdrop the M2 vehicle or 102 paratroops. This aircraft and crew, incidentally, is from the 17th Airlift Squadron at Charleston Air Force Base in South Carolina. And here they are demonstrating that landing performance. Full flaps at the back of the wing, slats and droops at the front. As it touches down, air brakes and spoilers popping up out of the wing. Engines going into reverse thrust. And the aircraft goes from a landing speed of more than 120 miles an hour to actually going backwards.
There are aircraft here at Fairford which have come from as far away as Australia, but the longest journey's been made by 2 tiny RAF trainers which have flown all the way around the world to get here. The Chipmunk entered service in 1949 and now almost all of them have been retired. For the last survivors, this was quite an adventure. They flew 15,000 miles across Siberia, Canada and finally the North Atlantic, arriving back in England just before the show. That journey would have been politically impossible a few years ago, but these pilots have shown that small planes can now fly east to the American continent.
In terms of interest, I mean, the interest must be flying to somewhere where very few people have flown, and we believe we're the first Air Force to have been invited to fly not simply across Russia but inside Russia, and visited some 20 airfields, and certainly in the Far East where we're meeting people who'd not only perhaps never seen a Royal Air Force aircraft, perhaps even didn't know there was a Royal Air Force.
The aircraft were fitted with extra fuel tanks extending their range to 500 miles. They flew with an island, a support plane and an engineer. But despite the Chipmunk's age, hardly anything went wrong. And for around £10,000, you could buy one of these aircraft yourself. At the end of their service life, they'll be sold by auction and need someone to give them a good home.
Well, back to jets now, and we're going to see a display team who've been to Fairford many times before, though they missed last year's show. The Spanish Patrulla Aguilar, or Eagles, fly the Casa 101 jet trainer. We're riding with their solo pilot, Captain Carlos Barcala. In fact, you can see our camera there taped to the side of his helmet. He's going to take us through the display.
We're waiting for the number 6 and 7 because they must take off before us. Now we are there. I'm putting the gear. The first part of the display is a close formation part, with the 7 aircraft perform, as you can see, different maneuvers in close formation. Now we are making a looping in this formation, changing to arrow. And we are ready for the first braking. Now we're pointing to the reference. Boom, pulling for the vertical, and you can see each side of the aircraft in order to see that I'm the vertical. You can see the lights, that indicates that the oil, there's something wrong in the oil system. Now nose down. I put the throttles in maximum and I reach the maneuver. During my display, well, I put more or less 7 positive Gs and 4 negative Gs. That are the limits of this aircraft. We're flying the reference and looking for the rest of the formation. All the other 6 are together, and now we'll perform a cross with them. The others, cross with them. Now I'm landing number 1, and all the 7 aircraft are at the runway.
Well, besides the ordinary aircraft enthusiasts, the show has many special guests, and there have been private visits this year from several members of the royal family. The tattoos, of course, are a draw for many VIPs, but none comes bigger than Dr. Buzz Aldrin, one of America's greatest heroes from Apollo 11, second man on the moon. What brings you here today?
Well, this wonderful air show. I happen to be over here on a QE2 cruise, and it was convenient to come over here and to help celebrate with the tattoo the 50th anniversary of the United States Air Force.
Yeah, it's a big year for them, isn't it?
Oh, it's a big year for me. That was the year that I first went into West Point, started my military career.
Yeah. Look, it's some 20-odd years now since the last man walked on the moon. Do you think we might see something like that again, or was it just something that's going to be a piece of history that you're obviously making?
No, I have a timetable. And the timetable includes tourism in space in about 10 years with the crew return vehicle that will be at the space station. And it'll be able to handle 7, 8 people. And some of those will be tourists in about 10 years. Then we might have a human mission, a 1-year mission to visit an asteroid and come back that would precede going to Mars. And when we go to Mars, I think we should visit the moon of Mars first. And that I think could happen around 2016. And then humans on the surface of Mars by 2018.
Buzz Aldrin, welcome to Fairford. Enjoy your visit here. Thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you.
Well, if Buzz Aldrin's presence adds spice to the American flavour of the show, there's plenty here for the home crowd to cheer. Here's a look at the best of British aircraft.
Just some of the many wonderful flying displays we've seen at Fairford this weekend. Well, while all that's been going on, the pilots have been filing through the Breitling marquee to try their hand at the Fighter Challenge. As you saw earlier, it's a virtual reality competition to find the world's top gun. Well, in the final, we had a Brit against an Italian. and it was the RAF which came out on top. So here we are, the winner and the gallant runner-up. Congratulations, first of all, to you, Mark. Was it a fair fight?
Definitely, it's been run very well. The computer setup and the equipment they've got is fantastic, and it's made for a really good competition over the last couple of days.
Went right to the wire as well, didn't it?
It did, yes. Shocking second one for me. I thought I had it in the bag, but he came back and got me from nowhere, what I thought, and an excellent shot.
How about you, Francesco? You're not too disappointed?
Yeah, not too much, you know. Well, he's a friend, so everything goes like this. He got 2 valid shots, so he won. And, you know, coming from nowhere at the same time, it's okay like this, yeah. C'est la vie, right?
Okay, thank you very much. Well, from the top guns to one of the top air display teams here at Fairford, as the Royal International Air Tattoo 1997 draws to a close, we're off to join the Red Arrows.
Even at a show with 8 international teams, everyone always wants to see the Red Arrows. And even the fact that they're one short, 8 aircraft instead of 9, doesn't deter the fans. More about that in a moment. But they're soon split up into smaller packages anyway. They call this manoeuvre the corkscrew, and there's a lot of upside down about it. Next, 6 of them are going to pull up into the vertical. And here we're able to see the lack of symmetry. There should be 7, but Red 3 has an injured knee and can't fly for a few weeks, and they just don't have a replacement. But anyway, having one missing doesn't stop them doing what they rather prosaically call the vertical split. Another team might perhaps call it a palm tree. But contrast the serenity of that with the raucous and punchy crossover manoeuvres of the synchro pair. Closing speeds 700 miles an hour. And here's an unusual view of what they call rollbacks. And see how the colour changes just before they pitch up and roll out. And here are the hard men of the synchro pair again. They call this the shotgun. Finally, even hard men have to prove they've got a heart. In this case, the biggest heart at the show. And after that, it's back to the main formation for the finale, the spine-tingly Vixen break.
Just brilliant that, wasn't it? The Red Arrows, a perfect close to the display for this year.
Of course, all that remains now is for these hundreds of aircraft to fly back to their bases around the world. But many of them will be back here at Fairford next year.
And we hope you will be too. But now we'll leave you with some more of the highlights from this, the Royal International Air Tattoo 1997. From us, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.